Hey guys, KangaskKid18 here, and today we've got a subject that I think is very interesting. In the past, I've told you how shinies for Pokemon like Seaking and Espeon used to look different from the ones we have today, but it turns out that's not exactly an uncommon thing. In the past, Game Freak has made different sprites for almost every new Pokemon game that came out, and a lot of times, the colors of shiny Pokemon didn't stay the same between games. So today, we're gonna look at 10 Generation 1 Pokemon that at one time or another changed their shiny coloration. Let's start with the very first Pokemon in the Pokédex, number 001, Bulbasaur. For almost every Pokemon game since Gen 3, Bulbasaur has had pretty much the same shiny colors, an olive green body with a darker green bulb on its back. But that all changed when Generation 6 came along. The transition to 3 dimensions gave Bulbasaur an all-new shiny, this time a mellow green body that doesn't contrast as much with its bulb. And honestly, I think this new shiny looks fantastic, and it was actually the first of the Gen 1 starters that I shiny hunted when X and Y came out. But Bulbasaur isn't the only starter that changed its shiny colors over time. Squirtle changed as well. Today, we know shiny Squirtle as being a lighter blue, with a green shell and paler yellow on its carapace. But way back in Gen 2, shiny Squirtle was radically different. Its shell was green and its body was light blue as it's always been, but it also got a green carapace. Now to be fair, this is mostly due to Gold and Silver using a limited color palette, but I don't care. I think the shiny looks fantastic, and its evolutions follow suit. Wartortle gets a different blue but keeps that green carapace, and Blastoise turns a purplish blue, but all its undersides turn that light green. Starting with Gen 3 though, Squirtle, Wartortle, and Blastoise all turned into the shinies that we know and love today. Up next, we've got the Cobra Pokemon, Arbok. Arbok is a really cool shiny, and from Gen 3 up to Black and White, it kept pretty much the same colors. Gold all over, with a blue and yellow pattern on its hood, and a blue mouth. And I love it, mostly because I'm a sucker for any shiny that gets a blue mouth. But then something odd happened in Black 2 and White 2. For some reason, everything stayed the same, but Arbok lost that blue mouth that I love so much. It's an odd stylistic choice, which continues through Gen 7. I hope the next time Pokemon models get updated, we'll see Arbok get its blue mouth back, but we'll see. Anyway, next up we've got one of my favorite Gen 1 Pokemon, it's Ninetales. Ninetales has an interesting shiny history. Back in Gen 3, shiny Ninetales turned a warm lavender color. But with Gen 4 came new, more detailed sprites, and shiny Ninetales changed as well. Overall, it turned a cooler purple-gray color, and it got these blue tips to the tail that we'd never been able to see before. And in my opinion, that makes all the difference. And shiny Ninetales is now one of the finest shinies in the entire game. Moving on, we've got Poliwrath. Poliwrath shiny didn't change much between Gen 3 and Gen 7. For a long time now, it's been a muddy green color, and while I think that looks pretty good, I've always liked Poliwrath's Gen 2 shiny. Back then, shiny Poliwrath turned kind of a teal color, and even though it's a little more of a subtle shiny, I think it's a really cool color scheme, and I wouldn't be upset at all if it still looked like that today. Up next, we've got the superpower Pokemon, Machop. Machop is another Pokemon that's had pretty much the same shiny from Gen 3 to Gen 7. It's always turned a nice brownish tan color, which looks pretty good. But back in Gen 2, shiny Machop looked like, well, not this actually. This is what a regular Machop looked like in Gen 2. Instead, Gen 2 shiny Machop turned a dark brown-gray color. And honestly, I don't like this shiny very much, and I'm glad they used brown shiny Machop in later generations. And up next is a Pokemon that's probably had more changes to its shiny than any other. Can you guess what it is? It's Geodude. For the most part, Geodude has been a bright golden color since the days of Diamond and Pearl, but it wasn't always that way. Back in Generation 3, Geodude shiny was a much duller color, almost brown. And back in Gen 2, it looked even weirder, with shiny Geodude turning a kind of rusty color. The other shinies look alright, but I still prefer the golden shiny Geodude we've currently got. Moving on, we've got kind of a 2-for-1. It's Ponyta and Rapidash. These two are classic Gen 1 Pokemon, full of nostalgia for me, and they've got amazing shinies to boot. Ever since Gen 3, shiny Ponyta has gotten bright blue flames, while shiny Rapidash got silver flames. Ask anybody to list their favorite shiny Pokemon, and they're almost guaranteed to have one of these in their top 10. But they didn't always look like this. In Gen 2, shiny Ponyta's flames turned a dull reddish-gray color, while shiny Rapidash's turned a brilliant violet. These two shinies are definitely really cool, but again, I truly love the shinies we've got today. Up next, we've got the punching Pokemon, Hitmonchan. I don't know why, but back in the days of Red and Blue, I always chose Hitmonchan over Hitmonlee when I got to the fighting dojo. And it's a good thing too, because Hitmonchan is my preferred shiny of the duo. Ever since Gen 3, its body has turned this kind of golden gray color, but its boxing gloves turned a bright blue. And while I do love this shiny, I think I might like Hitmonchan's Gen 2 shiny even more. Why is that, you ask? Well, because it gets more blue, obviously. Now, instead of just the gloves, shiny Hitmonchan gets a whole blue uniform, and its body turns a nice gray color. Again, this shiny came about mostly due to the color limitations of Gold and Silver, but I'll be darned if it doesn't look amazing. And finally, we've got one of the most classic shiny Pokemon, it's Gyarados. Everybody has a shiny Gyarados, either from Gen 2 or Heart Gold Soul Silver. And if I were to ask you what color shiny Gyarados was, you'd probably say red, because of course you would. From Gen 3 to Gen 7, shiny Gyarados has always turned a deep red color. And even though it's one of the more common shinies, it's also one of the best. But there's one game during that time period where shiny Gyarados turned an odd color. For some reason, in Fire Red and Leaf Green, shiny Gyarados turned a bright orange color, almost the color of a Magikarp. Now, to be fair, this is pretty close to what shiny Gyarados looked like in Gen 2. But with every other game making Gyarados a bright red, Fire Red and Leaf Green seemed like kind of a misstep. In any case, Game Freak decided to stick with red shiny Gyarados, so that's the color we know and love today. Anyway guys, that'll do it. The top 10 Gen 1 shiny Pokemon that changed their color. I'm planning to do a whole series on these based on each generation, but because they've been around so long, I could almost do another one of these videos just based around Gen 1. So let me know in the comments whether you guys would like to see another Gen 1 video, or if you'd like me to move on to Gen 2. But until next time guys, as always, we are gonna see you on the next Shiny.